I want to talk to you here today about some materials that were offered the public quite a long time ago on the subject of gradation. I want to talk to you about the root, the bridge. When you first say to somebody, we're going to make you better, or we want to make you better, he immediately asks the question, better what? Bank robber, of course, say he wanted to become a better bank robber. Now, somebody who has lumbosis, a weird disease that is only known in Scientology. Well, he thinks you're talking about making his lumbosis better. Now, the difficulty then is one of communication. And communicating what we are trying to do in Scientology to somebody who has no inkling that that can happen is difficult. And one of the most difficult things in the world is to tell somebody who thinks he's a body that he is himself. Now, the world at large tends to tell one another, but I don't think individually any of them believe it, but they tell one another that man is an animal, and that man is only an animal, and that when he dies, he is gone. Of course, that's just about as insulting as you can possibly get. That gives a guy no duration. An individual then is killed dead. So if you wanted to get even with your fellow man, you just go around and tell him, you're an animal, and when you're dead, you're dead. Now I've gotten even with you. Man has believed in life everlasting much longer than he has believed in being an animal. He's only believed that he was an animal, really, since he saw the first psychologist. I probably didn't state that very flatteringly with regard to psychology. People sometimes think I joke about these things, but the truth of the matter is, did you know that I got a hold of a book? Dianetics, Modern Science of Mental Health was published in May of 1950. And just before the first issue of Dianetics, Modern Science of Mental Health came off the publisher's assembly line, the last psychology textbook dropped off the assembly line in the same book company. The American Book Company was also publishing for the University of Chicago psychology text departments. So there was a psychology textbook which was written and printed before Dianetics, Modern Science of Mental Health was printed. But there they were, end to end. And as that last book dropped off the line, I caught it. And I turned around to the very nice young vice president of the publishing company and so forth, and I said, do you mind if I keep this? She said, well, it isn't really properly bound, and its cover will probably bend, but you may keep it. So I did, and I put it in my library, and I still have it to this day. It's odd that it no longer is representative of what they call psychology. That's very interesting. It teaches that man cannot change. It doesn't only teach that he's an animal. It says he cannot change. He said that nobody can change his intelligence. Nobody can change his ability. Nobody can change his behavior. Man can't change. He's finished. So you can say something worse than to somebody that you're totally mortal. You can say, you're in a mess, huh? Well, you're always going to be there. I hope I've cheered you up. So the world, having been taught this type of thing for quite a while now, then finds it rather hard to grasp the older and truer statement, which that man, an individual man, has been going for a very long time. And when he dies, he goes somewhere else. The man's believed that longer, but this other philosophy came in and tended to wipe it away. So therefore, it becomes rather difficult to tell somebody who is out on the street there, and you say Scientology, and this is where and what we do. Well, he isn't aware of the fact he's got any place to go, don't you see? He doesn't think he can get any better. He doesn't think anything's going to change, and so forth. Well, you have to show him. Well, because it is hard to demonstrate it to him or teach him intellectually, you can, however, do it with a synthetic graph. You can show that there are these various states. Now, by visualizing this graph, by visualizing on the graph and letting him see that there is this and that and the next thing, why then he is shown that there is some place for him to go. And that is the reason for this. Now, oddly enough, it is very doubtful if he will have any great reality higher than the next level up. He has a good reality on this one jump. He can visualize that. He can imagine that. When he gets to that, he can have another realization of the next one. It's very funny to see somebody who has just been, oh man, he's just been tearing up the ground to become first stage release. And he's gotten to be a first stage release. So he says, all right, I'm first stage release. I said, now second stage, you see. How do I get there? If you told him that he had to make this tremendous jump in 24 hours from where he stood to OT, you would give him a terrible lose. And very often somebody tries to tell people this and gives them a very bad lose. You shouldn't do that. Life is improved on a gradient. It's improved a little, and then it's improved a little more, and it's improved a little more, and a little more. If you expect somebody to come along with a great big horse syringe and chunk it into you and go, and there you are, an OT, operating Thetan, highest state there is, all in a second, why, then you've also bought the idea that you don't have anything to do with life. Because it is you and your awareness which is improving. It isn't the attendant and appendant machinery you're surrounded with, like your hands and your arms and your automobiles, that's improving. It is you. Now, in Scientology, we're in the business of handling life. And we are just about the first ones that have attempted this for a very, very long time. And we're very good at it. We have been at it now for quite a while. You take some Scientologist and measure him up to an existing situation, why, he may not make the most roaring success out of the situation in the first 3 minutes, but he will certainly do a better job of it than anybody else can. Now, if you had a very serious illness, one's mind would be so thoroughly occupied with being sick that one could only envision being well. So if you were talking to a very sick man, you might talk to him and say, there's a state of OT whereby you get 100 miles tall and that's it. I don't think he'd give you much attention. He'd be talking to those pains in his stomach. So to a very sick man, about all it could be envisioned by him would be not getting well. That'd be too big a jump. But not hurting. You get the gradient. If you could just fix him up, you could tell him, we'll fix you up so you don't hurt. He said, oh, thank heaven for that. You see, that would be a big win. But when you had him so he didn't hurt, why, he'd be saying, well, I wonder if I could sit up. Next gain, see, next state. And then if he's sitting up, why, he says, maybe I'll get downstairs tomorrow. If at any one of those, if you told him at that stage of the game, well, Joe, we're going to have you back on the job in your old state, you know, and playing on the local company football team by next week, he'd go, And the whole message here is when you tell a person about too big a jump, that you expect him to make too big an advance, in too little time, you will give him a lose. In other words, he doesn't then gain, he loses. And the gradation chart, which we have, is a prevention against this. It not only tells a person where he can go, but it tells him also in such a way and shows him the right stages to prevent his having a tremendous loss. Otherwise, he could lose. Oh, Scientology. You can imagine some state of mind like this. Oh, Scientology. Oh, yes, Scientology. All right. That's fine. Well, they'll make you an operating thetan there, and you'll be 9 feet tall, and you'll be able to beat up on the local government, and you'll be able to throw your wife in the Pacific Ocean. You won't have to bother with her anymore, and you'll just be all-powerful and so forth. Well, it probably wouldn't be very real to the individual, but even if he believed it, I can assure you it's going to take him several years to make it. And by the time he makes it, he won't have any interest in throwing his wife in the local ocean or beating up the local consul. Government, isn't it? Now, the individuals who are on this planet were not issued an instruction book about themselves. I wish to register a protest about this. They've got all sorts of technical writers, so it was no dearth of technical writers. And we have had to do it all from scratch. But this is an instruction book on self, not an instruction book on the body or how you should be a good boy or a good girl in the society. An instruction book on self. And how do you learn about yourself? What you're going to do, where you can go, what your capabilities are. Well, you'd learn that by studying one lesson at a time and by achieving one improvement at a time. And if you did that in an orderly fashion, you not only would get very few loses, but you would be able to advance up to a very high state. Also, there's another point which is interesting, and that is if you can, in actual fact, advance a person by processing more rapidly than he can tolerate. There's this other side of it. I can do that. But in every case, the individual has just gone, has practically collapsed. Too much gain, see? Oh, he walks out of the place, he's 9 feet tall, he's going to take on the world. You know, he's all set. Then he runs into a grasshopper, and the grasshopper kicks him in the teeth, and he falls flat on his back. He gets home. Imagine a guy being in such a state that he gets home and he said, "Boy, I feel wonderful." And all it takes is one little remark from his wife, "Well, you don't look wonderful, dear," to put him in bed. I wouldn't say he was in very good shape, do you? But you can advance an individual well up above his ability to tolerate. So that is another reason why it is done by gradation. Now, what does gradation mean? Well, there are grades to a road, and there are grades to steps. There are steep steps and shallow steps and so forth. And there are vertical poles. And a vertical pole is not a gradient. You want a gradual grade up. That's what gradation means in our particular sense. And classification means that we require certain actions to have been done or conditions to have been attained before we say that individual is classified in that grade and let him go on up. Now, we're not trying to keep anybody back. We're just trying to keep somebody from breaking his neck. We have the idea of a bridge. across the chasm. Now that is an old mystic idea that there was a chasm. There was a chasm between this existence, where we are now, and a higher plateau of existence. And that many people trying to make it fell into the abyss. Well, we've built a bridge, and we have this simile of the bridge, and the bridge goes from this state of existence to that state of existence, and the bridge is all complete now, and it can be walked. But there's one point: you have to walk on the bridge. You know, you wouldn't think you'd have to tell people this. You'd say to somebody, you can cross the Grand Canyon as long as you walk across the bridge. And you think that is enough, but by George, somebody will go down to the edge and walk off into thin air. And you say, so the gradation classification plan is a prevention of that kind of thing. It says there is a bridge. And if you're going to go across from where you are now to where you're going to arrive, well, you go across on the bridge. And you might say ethics, as you will connect with in organizations sooner or later, become aware of and so forth, is the traffic cop. And traffic cop says, that's the bridge, that's the abyss. That's about all it amounts to. This plan has been worked out for quite a long period of time. It's been very successful, and these states are attainable, and they walk forward. Now we have here just the chart itself, which has been published, and it goes from the bottom up. It is read from the bottom up. And it even has an elastic bottom. Some people are more bottom than others. Some people start from zero. Some people start from zero, you see. Now, you go up along the line here, you'll find out we've got a zero. Well, now, if some people start from zero, where do others start from? Well, some people aren't up to zero yet, and that's for sure. Now, we see along the bottom here the first negative 34 states. And the first of those states that is listed here is unexistence. Unexistence. But there are states way below unexistence. It's just that people in those states aren't likely to ever be able to read this chart, so we never bothered to put them on. Now you find that as an individual goes up here, a very funny thing about this chart, a person, for instance, at one of these lines, let us say unexistence, when he improves, becomes aware of disconnection. Now, disconnection would be an improvement over no existence at all. He gets the idea that he's disconnected from things. He becomes alert to the fact, he becomes aware of the fact that in life he's actually disconnected. You see, from not existing at all, he becomes aware of the fact that he is at least disconnected from things. You get the idea? So as we go up, a person at any one of these levels, no matter where they are on the chart, is most likely to become aware of the next exact level up. And this is levels and a map of what the individual can become aware of. So if you ask somebody who is down here in a state of fixity, fixed, there he is, stuck, he knows that. If we ask this individual to suddenly envision the idea of power, why? Me? Oh, no, somebody's wrong, see? But you could tell this individual that, oddly enough, it may not sound right in this particular But when a person is in total fixity, the first thing he's aware of is glee. On a harmonic on that, he's most aware of ridicule. Well, you can get the individual, he's stuck in the mud, totally stuck in the mud, and somebody comes along and laughs at him. Well, he hasn't paid any attention to anybody so far until somebody laughed at him. Now he's aware of it. This is a little guide here that's quite interesting if you used it in life, if you located what the individual is aware of. But don't make this mistake. This isn't what the individual is dramatizing. This isn't the individual's behavior. This is what he himself as a being is aware of. That's what he's aware of. So he's aware of the fact he's introverted. Now you can be aware of the fact he's introverted, but that doesn't make him aware of it, even when you tell him out of the best of intentions. You see, you can be aware of the fact he's introverted. Well, that doesn't put him at introversion. Is he aware of it? That's what puts him at introversion. You'll find a lot of human beings have to come up a long way to become aware of the fact they're introverted. That's actually a pretty high condition for Homo sapiens. And after he's aware of, if he's become aware of the fact that he's introverted, he can then, and only then, become aware of the fact that he's numb. He's numb. He doesn't get any reaction from life. So as he goes up the scale here, he becomes aware in each particular time and turn with each stage above that. Now, oddly enough, a very high state is the state of need of change. An individual who knows that he needs change in his life is few and far between. Most Homo sapiens wonder how they can endure the thing they can't change. Now, the one thing that Scientology can do, and the one thing it does do, is change conditions. And if there's anything that Scientology can do at all, it will be change of conditions. Now, used properly, it always improves the conditions. If you goof it up, it can worsen conditions. You see, that's why we insist it's used right. So, the need of change at -4 gives you the point where the individual can become a Scientologist. He's aware of the need of change. Individuals who are below that point have to be coddled and nursed and herded and handled with the greatest care. But when they get up to the point where they recognize the world is in need of change, they are a Scientologist or capable of being one. Got it? Now they go up from -4 here, the need of change. And the next thing they do after they become aware of the need of change is demand improvement. And after a demand of improvement, they can see that there's some hope. They can become aware of the fact that there is some hope. And when they're aware of hope, they can become aware of the fact that there's help and that they can help. Now, this individual then is aware of help. He isn't necessarily pleading for it. He's aware of it. And that's a 6-way proposition. You can help others, and others can help others, and others can help you, and, you know, that's it's a mutual ground sort of a situation. And you have an individual who is unwilling to audit others or unwilling to help others to the degree that he is helped and so forth. He isn't really up to that on the tone scale. You've got to audit me. All right, I'll gladly audit you, you audit me. Oh, no, I haven't got the time. You got the idea? Now, above that, the individual begins to have recognition. He begins to see where he is. His orientation becomes better. He begins to recognize, and the first thing he gets an inkling of is himself. He begins to recognize himself. And he begins to recognize others for what they are and the potentials of others. Now, he gets up to there, and he gets up to a point where he can communicate. Pretty high level. And above that, he gets up to a point of being able to perceive. And above perception, of course, in order to be oriented, you have to be able to perceive. You can't find out where you are unless you can perceive where you are. Obvious. And so you get oriented, and after orientation comes understanding, and after understanding becomes enlightenment. Believe me, enlightenment never takes place before understanding. Lots of people think it can, and modern universities are totally dedicated to this. Now, up above that, an individual again gets a return of his energy, he gets an adjustment, he becomes aware of the fact of a body and that he is not a body. He gets into a point where he can predict, he goes into action, he himself is capable of production, he knows a result when he sees one, he can review the things of his life and take care of it, he regains his ability, his purposes, his own purposes start coming out straight. For the first time, he didn't ever realize he was really running on other people's purposes, and he gets a clearing of his entire past and other purposes and a realization of himself, and then he goes into a state where he is capable of power. But by the time he gets into that state, he's of course totally responsible and can be trusted with it. Otherwise, he won't make it. Now, when we look all this over, we find ourselves one column on this chart. We have paralleled it by various techniques and activities which approximate these and bring about these conditions as they go up. And an individual moving up this chart, one after the other, does make these various steps and arrive finally at the top. There are various states called the state of release. There are 4 stages of release up to here. 4 stages of release up to level 5. Different states of condition, and then there is a state of another state of release is actually in this point, which is achieved, but that state we call clear. Now, clear is followed by the state of operating fate. In other words, an individual could operate totally independently of his body, whether he had one or didn't have one. He's now himself. He's not dependent on the universe around him. Now, that is what that chart describes, and that is a guide from the individual, for the individual from the point where he first becomes dimly aware of a Scientologist or Scientology, and how he can move, shows him how he can move and through what he should move on up through in order to make it. A lot of people are making it now that this chart has come into existence, and we're having no real difficulty getting people to attain these various conditions. You could probably audit somebody exclusively or practice on them exclusively on the basis of just the little changes I've just described to you in detail. You know, you could find that he was in this state and then coax him to become aware of the very next state mentioned, as I have just described to you, and an individual would come on up the line. It would be a full route in itself. The only thing wrong with that is he himself is rather bogged down with all kinds of machinery and odds and ends, and this makes it very, very hard for him to get close to himself. You have to know the secrets to what these things consist of before you can get him all the way out. Scientology does contain the entire map of getting the individual through all the various points on this gradation scale, getting him across the bridge and to a higher state of existence. The actual development of Dianetics and Scientology, it would be nice to tell you that it was only 15 years long. It isn't. It would be nice to tell you that it was only 30 years long. It isn't. It would be nice to tell you exactly how long it was, but you probably wouldn't believe me, so I won't bother to tell you how long I have been searching for the route, but having searched for it, there it is. I hope you have a very happy passage across the bridge. Thank you very much.